I'm here to talk to you about mental health and the workplace. I'm not a scientist or a doctor or any kind of techie person. I'm just somebody that realised that there was a problem within the workplace. I myself live with mental illness and discovered that when it came to the workplace, nobody really talked about it. So, um, in society, we talk about it all the time. It's on the radio. I hear Ray Darcy talking about it on RT1, and we see, celebrity confessions and all this kind of stuff, and people talking about the state of the mental health services and how poor they are. But when it comes to the workplace, all that talking stops. There's a lot at stake in the workplace. There's a fear of stigma and discrimination. There's a worry of how their colleagues are going to see you, and there's also a worry of how your boss is going to see you. So maybe it's best, in some people's minds, to stay quiet and to struggle on. We often hear that it's 1 in 4 struggle with mental health, but I wouldn't say it's 1 in 4. I would say 1 in 4 may be diagnosed with a mental illness, but 4 in 4 have mental health. We all have mental health. It's part of being human. It's what makes us who we are and unique, and it's what brings us into brings our individual offerings to the workplace. Some of us live with mental illness, but most of us don't, thankfully. And but we all have our ups and downs. So life takes its toll. Getting married, having kids. I have a 3-year-old at home. That's pretty stressful. And it all has an effect on your mental health. It goes up and down, and you can go right down to the very end of the spectrum and be super mentally healthy and mentally resilient and strong and all those kind of wonderful things, or you could be right down the very end of this, and this is somewhere that I have been, and I've also been down there. And I've been probably everywhere in the middle, and I'd say everyone in this room has been somewhere along this the spectrum. So how does stigma show itself in the workplace? Well, it can be very subtle and not really easily identified. It can be the way you're treated after you disclose a mental illness. Maybe your colleagues aren't as keen to talk to you or be as open with you as much. It could be that you're not trusted with certain tasks or asked to take part in particular projects. It could be that you're asked to take leave even though you're perfectly capable of doing your job. People feel tagged when they have disclosed their mental illness, and anything at all can be seen as your mental illness speaking. So if you disagree with a decision, or you're out sick with the flu, any other person in the room could be out sick with the flu, but if you've disclosed a mental illness, they don't actually believe it's the flu, they believe it's something else. So Sea Change are the National Stigma Reduction Partnership, and they conducted research last year during Green Ribbon Month in May. So you can see here what 1 in 4 actually looks like. So that's enough to fill 14 Crow Parks. And it's 6 times the combined population of all our universities and colleges. But what struck me about this research was that the amount of people that wouldn't want others to know about their mental health problem. So you have 56 people in Ireland, but it goes way up to 72% when we look at young men and farmers. They'd hide their mental health problems from their friends. And that again highlights young men as a definite risk, and that's obviously reflected in our suicide rates here in Ireland. And they would delay seeking professional help for fear of others finding out. And actually this reminds me of Al Porter speaking on the television a little while ago, and how he spoke about going outside of Dublin to get a prescription filled for his antidepressants. So 57% believe that being open about their mental health and work would have a negative impact on career prospects. And I am afraid to say that, yes, that it would be the case. I've just finished research in the area of disclosure in the workplace, and the majority of people I've spoken to, bar 2, all said that you would not want to disclose your mental health issue to your employer, and that it would negatively affect you, whether it be through management or through colleagues and how you're treated in work. 47% believe that being open about their mental health at work would damage relationships with colleagues. Now, I'm not so sure about that because I find that mental health is something that's talked about more in society and is actually reflected better in the workplace in the sense that we all have experience with mental health. We all know somebody, we've experienced it ourselves. So when you speak to a colleague, it's a bit like speaking to a friend. So I'm not sure how well that would reflect in reality. St. Patrick's Mental Health Services also did some research, which didn't really make for great reading either. I was particularly struck by the 22% that wouldn't trust someone who had previously experienced postnatal depression. They would be pretty stuck for a babysitter if that was the case. A lot of women suffer from postnatal depression, whether it's spoken about or not. So the cost of mental health is starting to be realised on the international stage, with many organisations focusing on it, the OECD, the World Health Organization and the World Bank. So what are the facts? So the World Health Organization estimates that by 2020, depression will become the second most important cause of disability in the world, and that's second only to coronary care. So if you're not going to have a heart attack, you're probably going to have a breakdown. So 27% of the adult population in Europe is affected by mental health problems. That's 93 million people. That's a lot of people. At any one time, 20% of the workforce is dealing with a mental health issue. And the employment rate for people with poor mental health is 15 to 30% lower, and their employment rate is twice as high as average. So the OECD in their mental health and workplace policy highlights the need for better workplace supports, including manager training, return to work processes, increased incentives, and for employers to tackle sick leave and presenteeism. Ireland is known as a knowledge-based economy, so it's imperative that those working are able to function mentally well, particularly since the company's economic efficiency and competitiveness relies on their mental and cognitive skills. Things like creativity, relationships, emotional skills, autonomy, the ability to make decisions and share knowledge, they're all key factors in mental wellness. CIPD conducted research last year about how mental health in the workplace affects performance. So as you can see, some of these would be very obvious and you'd kind of pick up straight away. So things like difficulty to concentrate, it takes longer to do tasks, you have a difficulty making decisions. I know for me, I get easily distracted and I find it hard to focus on anything for any particular length of time. But you also have other issues such as dealing with clients and workplace conflict. And that's really a case of people being afraid to be open about what's going on. So when they're confronted about it in the workplace, it turns into an argument, basically, because they're defending themselves. They don't want people to think there's anything different about them. So we have the two main causes or costs of mental illness. We have absenteeism and presenteeism. So absenteeism, you can see, is pretty straightforward. You're replacing staff members that are missing. When I was ill, I was out of work for about 5 years. And that was due to the fact that I couldn't get proper help. I was kind of left fending for myself. So when you're looking at absenteeism, it's anything from a couple of weeks to a couple of months to a couple of years maybe, and then you're able to get back into your job if they're holding the job for you. So you have all the expenses, the time, training in somebody else, all that goes along with that. And then you've got presenteeism. So this is much more complicated and can cause a lot more problems. So you're looking at things like more errors in the work, the quality of work reduces, the loss of ability to look after your clients, tarnished image for the clients, so reduced attractiveness of the company, and it's all down to the fact that people are there in body but not in mind. So this is kind of all of this really. So think of a day you've gone into work with a really bad hangover. Or you had to come into work and your child is home sick. You're just mentally, you're not there. You're back at home with your child, or you're back in bed with your hangover. You're not sitting at the desk doing your work. So, and it has a knock-on effect for this kind of thing. So that's all right for a day or two, But when you're talking weeks or even months, and if you multiply it by a number of employees that might be having difficulties, the problem becomes a lot greater. So, sorry. So there's also another way of looking at this, and that's to take a proactive and positive approach. And you can actually reap benefits, and it's not just looking after that one employee that's struggling, but it's really growing and developing your company and building a strategy upon your mental health approach. So what are the benefits? So you've the wider pool of recruitment and retention of staff, improved employee engagement because the channels of communication are open. People are much more comfortable talking about things and bringing issues before they become a problem. You've got improved creativity because you've got a more diverse pool of employees. You're not cutting off people at recruitment level when they say they have a mental health issue. And as a result, you've got better engagement with customers, so you have better understanding of the customer and obviously better delivery of services. And that also has a knock-on effect to your reputation, your market share, your bottom line. So I'm delighted to be able to give a really good Irish example, a fantastic Irish example in core media. So this company has really taken on board mental health as a strategy and has developed a program that comes from the very top down. So it's key that everything comes from the top. Employees see the reaction or the engagement by board members as a traffic light system. So if senior members of staff are not involved, don't care, don't really want to know, just kind of want to have it there, it's seen as box ticking and it's seen as tokenism, and they just won't get involved. So the core media encourage from the top down, they have open discussion about mental health, and that includes directors talking about their own mental health. And they work with employees and managers to be more mental health aware. They get training every year. It's topped up every year, so they're able to deal with their staff. So there's no referring to HR. It's dealt specifically in the team, as they feel the head of the team knows the team best, so they're the one that should really be dealing with it. So unless it's a problem that the manager can't deal with, it's too big for them to cope with, only at that stage would it go to HR, otherwise it stays very local. They can see that they work then with the employees to maintain productiveness because they have an open line of communication and they can be very honest with each other. They can work with the employee to try and figure out the problem and get it before it really becomes an issue for the individual or the company. They also value diversity, so they have employed people with mental health issues that have declared at recruitment stage because they don't see the label, they see the person, and they can see that everyone has unique talents and they can all bring something different to the workplace. So I know they have a few people working there with things like ADHD and I can't think of the word now. It is dyslexia, and they're all particularly creative, so they do really well in some of their departments. Now you can see that their absentee levels are running at 1.9% and that their market share has grown from 15% to 24% in 2015. And you can also see that their growth has gone up consistently really since 2011, and the growth for 2016 was 220 million. So the research that I carried out, which was just recently finished, I found that companies see mental illness as an expense to be avoided. So if you declare or disclose your mental illness to an employer, they really want to get you out of the building as quickly as possible. They don't see it as something that they want to deal with. It's just really kind of I'm trying to think of a polite way to put this, but I just can't. So I was going to say that they just want you out. They want to kind of move on and get somebody in to do your job as soon as they can. So they seem to take a reactive approach rather than a proactive approach. So even though the research shows there's a cost-benefit analysis and there's clear financial benefits when dealing with mental health, the connection is yet to be made by business. They have a heavy reliance on HR. Now, the problem with this is simply the fact that HR are not a cure-all for all that ails you in the company. HR are great at dealing with this, and indeed in core media, it's HR that have spearheaded their development of their mental health programme. But if management aren't involved and don't want to know and aren't trained, you're not going to get very far. So what happens if your HR person isn't able to deal with the problem, or in fact the person with the problem is your HR person? What do you do then? You can't just. I had one respondent tell me, once one person was trained in the company, but what if that one person gets up and leaves, and then you've nobody? So there's also a lack of appreciation for the role of culture in an organisation. They see it as, this is how things are, and not something that can be worked on and developed and built and be purposely created in order to harness, a positive workplace culture. So, as you can see, Mr. Hatch feels that culture in every company starts with how senior people behave, and I would tend to concur with that. So what is creating a positive mental health culture? Well, it's embracing diversity and inclusion. It's educating and encouraging your mental health literacy. So that is training your managers, it's having workplace talks, it's getting people in to talk about their mental health experience. It's encouraging your employees to be open about their mental health. You want to endorse and engage from the top down. So as I said, if it doesn't come from the board down, you're not really going to get all the way there. You need to engage for change. So it's important that you just really look at your organisation and see if is the environment right. If you're having problems with, union disputes, or you're going to go into a merger, or there's changes in the structure, maybe that isn't the time to be taking on something like this. Maybe that's something that you need to put off to further down the line. So you need to implement the positive changes, and it involves a conversation between management and staff. So it encourages everyone in the organisation to get involved. So I would, set up little committees to get their ideas going. So because people that are working on the ground, particularly those that are client-facing, they're the ones that know what they need. So you need to talk to them and see what is going to benefit them. So you also need to measure your success. So whether that is your sales or your absenteeism or your sick leave, whatever it is you feel is going to reflect your positive change, and then you need to sustain your organisation's mental health. So that means just not kind of doing something once a year or twice a year, or getting EAP in to talk to the staff for a lunch hour once a year. It's an ongoing process, and it's right across the board, and it impacts on everything. And I can't really stress it enough. Wellness needs to be taken into consideration with every policy that a company has, and it's not just your HR disclosure and reasonable accommodation. You have to take your staff's wellness into consideration when dealing with things like productivity and health and safety and stuff like that. So what does management need to do? Well, you need to develop a strategy, and that can only be done after a full and frank conversation with everyone in the business. So you carry out a policy and practice review. So have you got policies in relation to mental health? A lot of companies don't. Every company should have at least a workplace mental health policy. They should definitely have a disclosure policy, and they should also have something relating to reasonable accommodations. So what do you do when somebody comes to you and says, I am depressed and I need to have my hours adjusted, or I need time off to go to the doctor, or I'm in counselling on a Friday afternoon and I can't go back to work when it's over? You're going to have something in place there, and your management are going to have to know about it, and your staff are going to have to know about it, because they want to feel that they're not going to be faced with this wall of stigma when they come to you and ask for help. So you need to normalise mental health and talk about it. Make it part of the everyday conversation. Include it into your social events. When you're talking about doing kind of hiking and climbing and any other kind of walking, you can bring in the whole element of well-being into that. So you need to promote a good work-life balance. And I know this one in particular is very difficult because we're always working. My phone is down there. I was working up to like a minute before I stood up here. So, we're never off. And you're always at the end of email and text and phone, and even when you're on holidays or the weekend. But really, if you don't have a break from your work, you're going to burn out. and burnout leads to mental illness. You're just building up a problem that's going to impact on you later on down the line. I did speak to one company, and their work-life balance was seen as precious when the HR person was on leave and things were actually kind of going a bit, down the tubes a bit. They text her first before they could see if they could ring her. And, they said, you have to really value your time away from the office because it means you're fresher and energetic coming back in and you have more to give. So you need to promote positive work culture. So that's getting on with other staff members, creating a culture of collaboration and working together, and foster employee engagement, and ensure the voices of people with mental health problems are heard. This is something that's been taken on by a lot of companies. One of them that was particularly viral was Barclays Bank, I think it was. And it's This Is Me campaign, and it's basically little videos of staff members talking about their mental health. But the issue I would have with that was that no senior management were involved. It was all just staff members. So it all starts with the conversation. Now, starting a conversation about mental health can seem like a ridiculously scary thing to do, and you try and avoid it at all costs. But it's not that scary. And the person that you're going to talk to is probably relieved that somebody's actually acknowledging something's going on, and they're delighted to have a chat. So I don't want, if you go away here with nothing else other than it's okay to ask if somebody is okay, I'll be delighted. And go back into your workplace, and if you think somebody is struggling, maybe their performance is down, or they're just not talking as much, or they're withdrawn, it's okay to ask, is everything okay? And if they don't want to talk, that's fine with them, but at least you've asked and they know that you're open to the conversation if they want to come back to it. So as a colleague, starting the conversation, you need to talk but you listen to. As my mother said, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use accordingly. You take your lead from the person. So if they don't want to talk, don't push them. And avoid cliches like cheer up, you be grand, or it's the weather. And small things make a big difference. So bring them for a cup of coffee and just saying, are you all right? Is everything grand? Do you need to talk? And talk about other things. It's not all about mental health. We're not going into like a counselling session here. It's just really just checking in with them and check if they're okay. So as a manager, privacy and confidentiality are key. The person might come to the manager, but they mightn't necessarily tell their colleagues, so they don't want the manager telling anybody else. Be honest in relation to performance. Don't sugarcoat things. It's mental illness. They're not dying. They can take the news that things aren't going so well because they're very, very aware of it. They can see what's going on. They're just not acknowledging it. So don't make assumptions. If you feel that somebody's performance isn't great, or they're not turning up for work in time, don't assume it's something to do with their mental illness. It could be something completely unrelated, and that could be easily dealt with, and a short conversation can sort it out. Ask them what would help, because the person usually knows what will help them, because they've probably been dealing with this for a while, and treat them with respect. So, they don't want to feel that they're being looked down on just because they have a mental illness. And then finally, signpost them to supports and keep in touch. So check in with them every now and then, make sure they're okay. But the main thing I would say to a manager or a colleague, if anyone tells you about their mental illness, it is not up to you to cure it. You are only part of the big picture of life. So they've got family and friends, and they might have a doctor or a psychiatrist or whatever. Don't feel you have to take that burden on and bring it home with you, because that in itself will affect your mental health. So that's it. Thank you very much.